So, do you want in on the most underrated consulting or coaching skill? And no, I'm not talking about influence without authority. I'm talking about storytelling. And I'm not talking about how to use it just on the stage, but in every part of your work to build deeper client connections and deliver bigger results. Today, you're going to hear from not just one, but two former Disney executives who know better than anyone about the power of storytelling. And welcome to the Consulting Matters podcast. This is the show for purpose-driven consultants and coaches who are ready to own the power of what they do and position themselves for greater impact and income. I'm your host, Betsy Jordan, and I'm also an ex-Disney person. I wasn't an executive, I was a consultant, and then I became a consulting business owner. And now I am a business mentor and brand messaging and positioning strategist. So you can find out about all the things I do to help my clients like repackage the best of their careers and turn it into a business that they absolutely love on my website at betsyjordan.com. And don't forget, Jordan is with a Y. So today we're getting into the power of storytelling, not just as a performance skill, but as a leadership skill, a consulting skill, and a coaching skills with brothers Bob and Rick Allen. So both of these guys are former Disney executives who bring two totally different lenses to storytelling, Bob from the creative side and Rick from the operational side. And together, we're going to have a conversation around what storytelling really is and why it matters so much more than most consultants and coaches realize, and how to use it to elevate your influence and your impact. So let's get into it. Bob and Rick, welcome to the show.
We are excited to be here. Great to see you, Betsy.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I'm really excited to get into what you all are talking about in terms of like the overlooked skill set around storytelling and its role in leadership and business. But I want to put some context for my listeners is I know that you've spent like lots of time at Disney in different ways. I know, but it sounds like, Bob, you were on the operational and then the creative side. And I know you, Rick, from the operational side. Can you share a little bit about like your background at Disney and and how your experiences at Disney shapes the way you think about work and leadership today?
I think Rick, that's got to go. We got to start at the beginning, which really is with our dad.
Yeah. You want me to dive in and then we'll mess with that a little bit. Our dad, we when we talk about Bob and I and our dad together, we talk about having 102 years of Disney experience, Disney family experience, and you got to include Dad to add all that up. Dad started his name was also Bob Allen, like my brother, and he started at Disneyland in 1955 when it opened.
Oh wow!
He started as an hourly employee, and he had a great job. He had fabulous. His first job was there's a little train then called the Casey Jr. from Dumbo, and it went around Storybook Land and Fantasyland. Dad's original opening year job was he rode on the back of the Casey Jr. and he wore a whistle, and his instructions were if any guest fell off the train, he was supposed to blow the whistle.
Oh,
So that was his first hourly job.
So we think
you
about
guys were not born yet, though, or were you?
I was, yeah. Disneyland is 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day older than me. Or no, I'm older than it. So I was in 54 and Disneyland was in 55.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was not quite there. Born in 57, and so
yeah, you were in project development.
Project development, yeah, back then at those times. But Dad's career, yeah. His career though really grew. They moved fast. It was they moved fast back then. It was a fast moving thing. They got to, they all got to work with, Walt was very associated with all those people because it was such a small organization, and Dad was in operations, and he got to work in guest relations, and he got to work in entertainment. He was part of the production coordinator to help the very first candlelight procession that happened at Disneyland. So he was part of that. We have a really interesting story about Dad joining Celebrity Sports Center. And Betsy, I don't know if you or and particularly your audience might not know what Celebrity Sports Center is, but it was like a indoor recreational center, a family recreational center that you would see today. It was in Denver, Colorado. 82 bowling lanes, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, big slot car tracks, and like 4 restaurants and penny arcade. And Walt bought it along with a bunch of other celebrities, and that's why they called it Celebrity Sports Center.
Yeah, they were all Hollywood celebrities. Art Linkletter, Jack Benny. There was a whole bunch of them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was really something. As a matter of fact, it's a funny story about how how he got the job offer. In quotes, Dad was just a regular supervisor at Disneyland at the time, and Card Walker was the president of the company, and Dad got a call on the radio that said, "Hey, you need to come to the office," and so he did, and they said, "You need to call Card Walker," and Bob, what do you say? That's like saying that's like a private calling a general or something.
Yeah, that's like an ordinary seaman calling an admiral. I'm sure he had to swallow hard a couple of times before he made the call.
Yeah, so he called Card, and Card said, "Bob, we've got to talk to you about. I've got this job offer for you. We want you to go to Celebrity Sports Center. Here's what it is. Walt's bought it. We're going to take it over, and we need you to Disneyize it. We'd like you to go out there, move your family out there, and do that." And Dad said, "Boy, that's an honor, Card. Thank you. That sounds tremendous. Of course, I need to go home and talk to my wife, but let me go do that." He said, "That's great, Bob. Let me know." Dad went home and he talked to my mom, and they hashed it out over I think a pretty long evening of discussion, and Mom was pretty clear. "No, we are not going to move this family there. We have your parents over down the street, and my parents are down here. We get help. I've got these 2 little kids. Another one coming. No, we are not going to do that." So Dad dutifully went back to work the next day, and he called Card and said, "Card, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's really an honor and a privilege to get asked, but we've decided that we're going to pass on this one." Dad tells the story that Card didn't miss a beat. He said, "Bob, I understand completely. Now, I'm sending your plane tickets over to your office tomorrow for you to go out to Denver this weekend. I've got a realtor all lined up to meet you. You're going to find a great house, and you and Raleigh and your family are going to love living in Denver." And Dad said he didn't miss a beat either. He said, "Thank you very much, sir. I understand, and we will go out there." And so that's kind of how the company culture was back then. You went for it.
Dad's.
Anyway, so Dad got to.
Did you move to Denver?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The punchline of the story is, Dad would always say, it wasn't until that moment that the light bulb when I realized this had never been an option. So now he's got to go home and tell Mom, "Well, yeah, actually, we're going to do this." But yeah, we moved to Denver, Colorado in 1960, late 63, early 64, and our Colorado adventures, we were talking about them last night. It was absolutely a blast. We had a ball, of course, living in the Rockies and doing all that stuff. And Dad, got this interesting opportunity to be, it might as well have been 1,000,000 miles away from headquarters and Disneyland and all the stuff that he knew, and kind of fly solo, which in retrospect, he would back really, really helped advance his career. Plus, it also gave him, Walt loved celebrity, and so he came to Denver a lot. So Dad actually got some FaceTime and personal interaction with Walt, which was a real treasure.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and then we better click through it. But Dad, after that, got to go work for the project Mineral King, which was going to be a ski resort that Walt Disney wanted to build in California, and it was just a tremendous. He got to go around the world researching ski resorts, and that project never happened, like lots of projects do. But it was part of his development and learning. He got to join the Florida project planning team. So as a group in the late 60s got together to plan what Walt Disney World would be, he got to work that early on it. And then we all moved out to Florida in 1970 for the Walt Disney World opening in 1971. And Dad became over time the site executive at Walt Disney World. And so he worked there until he passed in 1987. And that led us to obviously our. And I probably should say we're honored that Dad was named a Disney legend. He's an official Disney legend in 1996, and we got to go out the other day. We got to go visit the archives at the studio, and there's plaques of all of the Disney legends out there. Wow. It was a lot of fun to see.
Does he have like a door or like sketched in on Main Street?
Yeah, he's got a window on East Center Street at Walt Disney World.
Aw. I didn't know Disney was building experiences like that. I thought that came like much later after the theme parks. I didn't realize that before. And Rick, do I remember accurately, like you did something with like that Great Wolf or something, that resort? Yeah. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
So that seems like a little bit of a echo of what you might have had in your childhood. Is that?
Yeah, yeah, I'll click through mine since we've spent so much good time talking about Dad. But so I've got 43. I had 43 years in with Disney operations, and that started in 1974. As the custodial host sweeping streets on Main Street and in Fantasyland, and I got to be on the Jungle Cruise, and I got to get to know characters well. So all those things are fun, and I ended up getting an MBA from the University of Florida. Started in operations full time as a salaried guy back in '82. And ended up in resorts and just worked my way up through resorts. Had some great times there. 7 different resorts, 24 years as an executive there. All-Star and Animal Kingdom Lodge and Fort Wilderness and Grand Floridian. One of the highlights for me was being the opening general manager for Disney's Art of Animation Resort. So I got a chance to be on the planning side of that for the operations with my operations hat on, and then get my team together to get it open, and that was a ball. And I got to finish my career as the general manager for Future World, which was a great way to include parks in there. And after I retired from Disney, got to work at Give Kids the World. That's how I think you and I even talked when I was at Give Kids the World. You called, and we talked about doing some work together, which was great, because anybody that ever called Give Kids the World knew they had to volunteer their time, because that's how that always worked. And then, yes, after that, I sort of officially became a consultant, and I got to work for Great Wolf Lodge and for almost a year at different resorts they had there. Got to work for the Special Olympics USA Games in 2022. Worked with my brother's Bob's company, Ideas, and things like that. And today I do talks and keynotes for various groups and do consulting for that too. And Bob, I didn't save you any time. Did you?
Hey, can I ask you to choose among your favorite resorts? Like, if you have a favorite, am I allowed to?
You can, but you know that when you're out there, the answer to that question is always the one you're in, right? So I would always, wherever I was. But now that I suppose that the statute of limitations is out, Animal Kingdom Lodge, I just love Animal Kingdom Lodge. It's
Me too.
Do you? The cultural reps make that so special, and the design is so intricate. I just loved it. Yeah.
It's my second favorite, though, actually. My favorite is the beach club.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Well, they're all good for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right.
So,
well,
Bob,
I'll do my
your background.
Yeah, I'll do my walk through the roses, and I'll go pretty quick. Like, first of all, and Rick and I like to play with this when we give our talk, but it's like, so my brother has this focused, clear, planful, interesting, buttoned down career. I got none of that. So I was like, I had the aerosol career. So I was a music guy, sang in choirs in high school and became a guitar player. And so I started out, kind of on that side, came to Florida and then immediately left because I got out of high school, went to the University of Colorado in Boulder and became a musician and worked in radio and spent a bunch of time doing concert production and all kinds of stuff like that. And then, as happens, evidently you're supposed to graduate from college. So I finally did. And the one thing I was not going to do was, cut my ponytail off and go work for the company my dad worked for. And so, of course, that's exactly what I did. I ended up getting an offer I couldn't refuse from a guy named Bob Yanni, who was the vice president of entertainment then based at Disneyland, to go to work for the entertainment division. So I started out as a production assistant and became a stage manager and show producer at Disneyland Live Entertainment. Great time to be there. This is about 1976. I got to work on the Main Street Electrical Parade and all kinds of really, really fascinating, really new thinking was going on then. Many adventures. And then I also kind of had a media freak side of me. I liked things that had buttons and lights and knobs. So I ran into a guy from operations and a guy from the Disney University out there, a guy named Tom Carr and Steve Casper. And we got together and said, hey, we all like the same stuff. So we formed a little media production team and got attached to the Tokyo Disneyland pre-opening division and spent the next few years making really training and marketing media for the Tokyo project, which was, again, super fun because first step outside the United States. Disneyland hadn't done an opening really other than Walt Disney World since then. Got to work for Jim Cora, who was a great leader to work for. And we moved our whole little operation out to the old Pony Farm house that was on the property at Disneyland before Disneyland was there. And it was originally where Owen and Dolly Pope lived, the first wrangler who ran the pony farm for Walt. And we had a great time. It was cool. We were all isolated out there by ourselves. And, we had a garage to keep our stuff in and a basketball hoop and a barbecue. And we just had a wonderful time. Got to go to Japan very early. That was neat. Then I kind of migrated up to WED. And I really literally attached myself to WED because I really wanted a piece of Epcot. So I got to sort of...
you might have to... I'm sorry, Bob. You might have to say what WED is.
Oh, sorry.
What is WED?
Well, that was what Imagineering was called before it was an Imagineering.
Oh.
It was Walt's initials, Walter Elias Disney. And so WED Enterprises was the original name of what we now call Imagineering.
Fun.
So went up there and...
I think WIG makes more sense, though, than WED.
Well,
it's not a good name.
It depends. There's some nostalgia for a lot of us old guys about that name. But anyway, I got to sort of apprentice my way into working on some pieces of Epcot, a couple pieces of Communicore, worked a little bit on Spaceship Earth, really fascinating project, to be on. And then was able to move my unit, my Disneyland guys, because I was still at Disneyland as well. We moved everybody to Florida for the opening of Epcot. And we had a big pre-opening effort working for Bill Sullivan, who was then the VP or director, I guess, of Epcot. And then we ended up settling down and attached the Walt Disney World marketing division and formed a media production company there, oddly called Media Productions. And then when the studio tour project came along, I kind of waddled over and said, hey, you know what you guys need? You need somebody who understands the park business with one side and the motion picture television business with the other side. That would be me. Why don't you let me play? And so I did that. I got to work in project development for Studio Tour, working with Bob Weiss and Craig Russell and Bruce LaValle. And then after the park opened, I actually got to run the studio part of it, not the park part of it. I ran the backlot. So I ran sound stages and lighting, grip and camera and post-production and all those things. Somewhere in there, I also picked up a couple other odd jobs. I ran the resort entertainment division for a while and had some fun doing that. And then in the mid-90s, for a lot of really interesting reasons, I got a almost unprecedented opportunity to buy my division from Disney and make it a private company. So we began that discussion in 1997, and it took till 2001 to make the deal, but we did. So in July of 2001, we always tell the story this way. We went home with our blue Walt Disney World IDs on Friday, and on Monday we came back to the same office doing the same thing with our green operating participant IDs, and we became a separate company, and we're an operating participant at Disney for several years, and then moved off the lot finally in about 2008 down to downtown Orlando and ran the studio there. So I ran ideas as an entrepreneurial small business. And I hasten to add, my brother got an MBA, my degree's in writing, so, everything I learned about business, I learned from Disney, which helped me a lot. Ran that for about 25 years. And then a couple of years ago, sold it. And I still work there. And my new gig is I've got this new project, and that's where Rick and I are working together, that I call the Zenovation Network, which I think is a whole new way to approach, keynote talks, workshops, a little bit of consulting, and where it kind of blends my two passions, which are Zen practice and, of course, storytelling. So that's kind of me.
I have so many things I want to follow up on. I want to get into the Zenovation thing because that sounds fascinating, and I know my audience is dying to hear about that. I just need to answer one question real quick, or need you to answer one question. Like, whose idea was it for you to take that and make it a private company? Like, did Disney say, "Oh, I want to do that," or was it like, "I want to do that"? Like, what?
No,
because that's a really interesting entrepreneurial opportunity to go entrepreneur to entrepreneur. That's a very interesting way to even think about different business opportunities.
So the idea was Al Weiss's. Al and I had known each other a long time. I met Al when he was the finance manager in marketing, and we knew each other pretty well, and we were talking. And so part of my whole career was always, again, most of the jobs I had in the Walt Disney Company, nobody had before I had them, because I would go in and say, "Hey, can I go do this?" Or "I think you need this," right? So I was talking to Al because, frankly, I was getting bored. So I went up to say, "Hey, what else you got? Something broken? Can I fix it?" And he sort of said, it was pretty wise, actually. He sort of said, our company, the parks organization particularly, the next 10 or 15 or 20 years are going to be real different than the last. We're a mature business now. We were really settled in. And he said, you're kind of a cowboy and probably you're not going to have as much fun. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. He said, so yeah, I got a couple things, but what do you think of this idea? I said, I think I need some of the stuff you guys do, but there's things I think you want to do that you can't do if you work for this company. He said, why don't you just buy it from me and I'll buy services from you. And my first reaction was, don't be ridiculous. I said, I'm a guitar player and a writer. I'm not an MBA. I'm not a business guy. And of course, as just in the same tradition as our dad with the Denver story, I went home, talked to my wife, and she said, yes, you should do that. You're not having any fun. Go do that. So that's how it happened. And
wow.
And if I had known all of the things I then learned, I probably never would have done it. And I imagine a lot of entrepreneurs would, if they were honest, would say that because, what you do when you're an entrepreneur at this certain point is you just jump and hope you land on something soft. And that's what we did. Went to the bank, borrowed a bunch of money, wrote a check to Bud Dare, and he handed me some keys. Literally, this is true. He handed me some keys and shook my hand and said, congratulations, you bought yourself a great new business. And about then, it's like the new father moment. It's like, what have I done? That's how it happened.
Did you get to take some of the cast members that you worked with you?
It was really cool. What we did was I rolled it out to the cast that we were going to do it about 2 weeks before. And I said, okay, so just by this date, I just need to know if you want to go with or you want to stay. And by the way, whatever you pick is great. Don't worry. It'll all work out fine. And by the way, it did. And, pretty much everybody who wanted to come with were the people I was going, yeah, I hope they come with. And frankly, the people who stayed are people who should have stayed. And by the way, a lot of them are still there and they all did great.
Interesting. So you probably had the dream opportunity to start as an entrepreneur in many ways. It's like, oh, here you go. And we're going to buy stuff from you. And you have the Disney name associated with it. Like, what could go wrong? Like, that's like the dream. Rick had a drum up business. You had the business already there.
Yeah. I'll tell you what could go wrong, though. We closed the deal on July. We closed the deal on July 1st. And on September 11th, the entire world stopped. September 11th, 2001. Disney closed. They weren't buying anything. No television was getting produced. I mean, literally, it was the biggest inflection point in the history of the United States. And it's a long other story. The only reason we survived, and it was truly luck, the only people who had any money to spend was the United States government. And we ended up getting a huge project with the Navy. And that's how we survived. So it was baptism by fire. For sure.
That is so interesting. So you both have you have similar, obviously, your dad's experience that you had that in common, the Disney part in common, you're coming at it from very different angles in terms of your career. And we were trying to figure out what is the focus for this particular episode. And we landed on storytelling, which I think is kind of interesting because you're coming at it from this creative side. You're coming at it from an operational side. So what is it about storytelling that you think is such a valuable skill and that it's such a priority of what we're even going to be talking about today?
Let me start on that, Bob, and I know you'll kick in, but what actually made me think about it, Betsy, was your podcast with Meg Crofton. So I listened to that the other day and on shaping thinking. And by the way, I think I was in the audience with you when we saw Meg give that talk at one point when she was getting ready to retire. Anyway, Meg was pretty clear in there that she said, by the way, I think storytelling is one of the key things that really make a consultant worthy, good at what they do. And I thought, man, I've really never heard Meg say that. And Bob and I have always really believed that. It's just such an important way to be able to communicate what you do. I've never been a charts and graphs guy. Those things don't work for me. And we always tell people when we're getting ready to go do a talk with them or something like that, he says, no, there's not going to be any of that. We're going to get our point across by telling stories. And I don't know, Bob, you've got you've got a little bit more detail on how storytelling works.
Well, yeah, storytelling's church for me. I have practiced my whole life. So the way I always talk about it is to start with, storytelling, the ability to do it, which by the way is native, but it is the way our species, which is slow, soft, relatively toothless, our young can't survive on their own for several decades after they're born. It's how we took over the planet, because we alone on this planet right now have the ability to get stuff that's up here above, in our noggin, out of our noggin into your noggin. And that is our superpower. That's our magical thing. And it is really very, very clinically proven that that's true. It's also native. It's the native nutrition for human brains. Human brains are literally physically constructed to thrive on stories. In fact, to Rick's point about charts and graphs, or my nemesis in life, bullet points. Don't
look at the show notes for this episode, because there's going to be bullets. I promise. Just want to warn you. I don't want to trigger you.
When you feed your brain those things, it has to work really hard to convert them into narratives so it can then digest and think about them. So it's really that basic. But in our practice at Ideas, we have, for instance, we have a process we call Story Jam, and it was our replacement for the design charrette, which I find to be not so effective, but unless you happen to be an artist. But everybody tells stories. All humans tell stories, right? So we said, well, we have to define what a story is. So, what I always preface this by is, now if you lock 12 storytellers in a room and say, hey, we want you to come out with a clear definition of what constitutes a story, the only thing that's going to happen is a fist fight. But we have an operating definition. So there's 6 elements of story that what I will say is, fundamentally, if these 6 elements are present in the construct, it's probably a story. So it goes like this. Number 1, you got to have characters in the story, and it's good if you pick characters that the audience is going to care about. So that's first, characters, right? Second, stories take place somewhere, so you have to have a setting. And in order for that setting to work, you have to really paint that setting picture. People have to know. Otherwise, even if they like your character, their mind's going, wait, but where is she? Where is that character, right? So story setting, you need a distinctive and interesting voice as the teller of the story with a very specific point of view. And when you watch a movie, it's interesting. You think you're seeing and hearing the character's point of view. You're not. You're seeing the writer's point of view filtered through the director's interpretation. The actor's just delivering it to you. So character setting, voice, you got to stick the story together with plot, and plot points are this glue that stories have to have, so that it makes it easy for the audience to follow, and also is the thing that makes you want to turn the page, even though it's real late at night. Say, oh no, I got to find out what happens, right? So character setting, voice, plot. Stories are made of details. Stories are hugely populated by details. Really good writers, really good performers, really good poets. What you'll find when you walk away, Rick and I were again talking last night, go read something very well written. Go read a Ray Bradbury story. Go read a Cormac McCarthy story. Rich detailing. And that helps people flesh out the world, because when we hear stories as humans, we make pictures in our minds. So you're feeding them the art direction, right? And then finally, and I always say it this way, kind of tongue-in-cheek, if you are telling stories to humans, and I've never told a story to another species yet, but I may, to be a story, it has to have all those things, and then it has to be richly imbued with emotion. If you don't do the emotional part, what you've got is a data set. It might be a very skillfully constructed data set, but you got a data set. So those are the 6 things that constitute a story. And the way you use that, and there's lots of kinds of stories that are constructed in particular ways to do particular things. But that's always where we like to start, with story.
I love what you're talking about. And it feels like that's a huge part of what I do, is it like in brand messaging, except for, I don't know if I do the details as much, but I love this whole idea. So it's character setting, voice, the voice of the story from the point of view of the storyteller, plot, details, and emotions are the 6 things that are there. So I think a lot of people could say, okay, so this is really great if I'm like up on a stage and I really want to tell a great story on the stage. How do you see like storytelling playing out, like just in everyday kind of stuff? Like, Rick, if you were doing leading one of your team meetings or trying to pitch something to Al Weiss on something, like how does this play out, in regular leadership and regular consulting, not just on the stage? Because you could see on the stage like, oh, I'm going to bring the audience in, but in the regular, and how does it get embedded into experiences? I know, Bob, you have like experiences that you design as an Imagineer. The experiences tell the story as well. How do you pull that off in those other ways?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll give you an example of a way I used a story with my teams over and over and over again. And the lesson that we were trying to get across, and I would bet you would agree with the point, but at Disney, in the Disney culture, relationships are really important to get things done. And we also wanted to make sure that our teams understood that that's the same thing with guests. We were able, if you can establish a relationship with a guest, that's much better than not having that relationship. And our guests, as you guys know, we have billions of dollars of infrastructure in attractions and in hotels and all that. And 99% of the guest letters that we get are things that our cast members do. We get a note that's saying, this guy held the door open for me, and I just couldn't believe that. And for my mom, and he said hello to her every morning on the way. Nothing about $6 billion Space Mountain, but we get a lot about those things. And so to encourage that understanding to my team, I would share this story that I had a housekeeper. I was a brand new general manager for the Caribbean Beach Resort, Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort. And I had just joined that team. I'd been a GM for a while, but I just joined that team. And so I was going around to my different guys and asking them about their teams and how they work. And this was a story I'd share. I went to our executive housekeeper, Letha Harley was her name, and I said, Letha, who is our best trainer in housekeeping? And she says, that's easy. That's Betty Jackson. She is the best. She gets the most guest comments by far than anybody else, and we send all of our new housekeepers to Betty Jackson. I said, great, sign me up. I want to go get in costume and do training with Betty Jackson for a day. And so we scheduled it, and I got my costume, and I met Betty in the morning, and we started cleaning rooms together, and she was teaching me how to clean a room. But as we went through the morning and several different rooms, I noticed she was missing lots of things. She was missing actually some pretty basic things. One time she didn't look under the bed for trash, and another time, she forgot to replace the amenities, the shampoo and all that stuff, and forgot to look in some drawers for things that maybe a guest might have left behind. So I thought, what am I going to do now? I'm halfway through our best trainer. So I finally said, Betty, let's pause for a minute. And I've just got to ask you, I said, you've missed a couple things here, A, B, and C. And she said, oh gosh, Rick, I'm so sorry. You're right. I don't know what's got into me today. And I said, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm the GM and I'm intimidating and who knows what. And so I said, let's just sit and talk for a minute and try to reduce the stress a bit. I said, how long have you worked here? She goes, oh, Rick, 25 years. I said, really? Do you like it? She goes, I love it. She goes, let me show you why. And we walked over to the door of the room, and she looked out the window, Caribbean Beach, and she said, so up there is 1801. Now, 1801, that's, Donnie Davis, and he's here on business. And so, he had meetings for the last 2 days, but his last day is tomorrow, but he's got some meetings throughout the day. He's going to need a late checkout. So I'm going to call and make sure he gets a late checkout later on this afternoon. Now, the next one, those are the Johnsons. Now, the Johnsons, they're here with the two twins, Bobby and Denny, and they both like Buzz Lightyear, and they're here from Iowa on their vacation. They're in Magic Kingdom today, but they were in Epcot yesterday, and so I'm going to put a little towel animal of Buzz Lightyear in their room so that they welcome them back to the room. And then the next one, that's the Tina Stevens and her husband Derek, and they're here on their honeymoon, and so they're going to have California Grill tonight, and so I'm going to write them a little note today saying thank you, and congratulations on your honeymoon. And Betsy, she went, they cleaned 18 rooms a day. She went room by room. She knew every one of her guests. She knew why they were there. She knew their names, and she knew how she could make something special. I learned at that moment that she was one of our worst cleaners, but she was one of our best housekeepers because she established those relationships. Now, I could stand in front of my team and tell them till I'm blue in the face, guys, relationships are important. They're really important. Let's be sure we do relationships. And we can have big posters on the wall that say relationships are important. But you tell them that story, and I've had people forever going, now I get it. And I don't know if that helped, but that's an example of a way I think you can tell a story that they're going to remember that'll help get that point across.
Okay, I love how you just did examples by answering my question with a story. So, Bob, I'm going to ask you, how did Rick do? Did he hit the 6 elements of the story? Uh-oh. What did he do well, and where could he improve his storytelling here? So we got a character.
It's Betty. It's not a fair question. Rick's a great storyteller. He comes by that organically. Yeah, I know. I've heard that story about 50 times, and I love it every. Right. I'll tell you.
He got an A, so he hit all 6 points.
Let me tell you why he got an A. So I never met Betty, but I could draw her for you. I know exactly what Betty. Now, it may not be anything like what, but I know what my Betty looks like. I know what her face looks like. I know her expression when she's telling Rick those. So that's a great example of why story is so powerful. You get it cognitively, but you also get it metacognitively in a way that you don't even fully understand, that makes it much more easy to act on. And so let me extrapolate from that example, because you ask, well, how do you use this when you're not a stump storyteller on a stage? Heck, nobody hardly ever gets to do that. So if you think about a really dry piece of work, a pro forma, okay, well, if you just pop the spreadsheet on the wall and you start in the middle and start staring at numbers, that's really different than if you hand the spreadsheet and say, we're going to get to the numbers, but let me set the stage for you. Here's what's going to happen in Puerto Rico in 2027 when this park opens. A kid named Juan, who's never had this experience in his whole life, is going to be able to get a job doing something that's going to thrill him, allow him to celebrate his culture, and maybe have a career his parents never dreamed of. And I paint that picture 3 or 4 times. Now, let's start at the back end. Not only are we going to do that for Juan and those that couple that came off that cruise ship and those convention guys who we talked about coming to the party, we're going to make a 15% return on shareholders' equity year in, year out for 20 years and exit at a 10x value. Now I'd like to show you how we're going to do that. That's a story.
So in some ways, then the storytelling is just like, it's a mindset. It's like, so if you're doing an interview like this one, it's like, instead of just answering it like conceptually, like with the bullets, is you tell the story and then you may hit the point afterwards, but you kind of paint the picture first of what it is that it's, instead of telling it, you're painting it. You're painting it with words.
Yes, and you weave the points in, but most people are much more willing to follow your story if you give them a little upfront reason why they might be interested in where it's going. So if you say, the way I always would describe this metaphorically is, so you're at an airport bar, at a busy airport. And, when I'm in airports, I'm like, I do everything I can to just sort of project this notion that I'm in a cocoon, you can't see me, just don't bother me. But you're in an airport bar and somebody sits down next to you. If that person leans over and invades your space and says, hey, you got a minute? I just want to show you the spreadsheet. The first thing I'm going to do is pretend not to speak English. Oh, lo siento, no sé, But if that same person sits down and says, okay, bear with me here. In my hotel this morning, there was a penguin in the lobby. I'm not only going to listen, I'm going to buy that guy a drink. I want to know what happened with a penguin, right? And if the end game is the same, and by the way, here's my spreadsheet, and I'm from the Johnson Penguin Company, and that's great. In fact, I might even buy a penguin from you. So I think the idea is it pretty much is a universal solution. I'll be that bold. Mm-hmm. I can't. I'll tell you another quick anecdote. Some of the most intriguing stories we've been able to gotten to develop ideas, are for scientists, finance people. I'm doing a talk this month. I have a talk called Restoring. I'm doing that for an aerospace technology company that's driven by huge brainer engineers. And what they want me to talk about is, we got all these great solutions, but these guys don't know how to tell stories about it. Okay. So my claim is going to be that there, and now language is important, right? So a quantum physicist will say, well, I tell stories. And I will say, yes, you do. Unfortunately, the language you speak is a level of mathematics I can't understand. But I don't understand. I don't understand Swedish either, and I'm sure their stories are good. So, I think it's all story at one level or another.
So what would you say to someone who says, like, but don't most executives just care about the bottom line? Like, I want to show I'm credible. Like executives like Carl Williams, like, what do you care about, the story, when he's like pretty much a bottom line kind of guy?
Well, first of all, you just named one of the best storytellers Rick and I know. I mean, Carl Williams is a great example. But you talk about voice, laconic Carl Williams. Right. So let's take Carl Williams. Yep, bottom line might be the focus, but the way Carl's going to get there is, well, Rick, let's start with the fact that those 15 assumptions haven't been true for about 10 years. Now, I remember the time. That's how, Rick, am I lying? That's how Carl does it.
No, that's Carl. He told me a story one time when he first joined the company. He came to do a quick presentation, a little pitch to, oh gosh, our chief financial officer. I can't remember who our CFO was at the time. Anyway, so it was a big deal. And he sat down next to another guy who was getting ready to go to see him as well. And the guy had 3 notebooks that were like, really, really thick, 3 inches thick. And Carl said, you're going to go talk about your idea? Yeah. Oh yeah, man. I've been working on this for months. It's great. Carl had a sheet of paper with him. And so, where the story's going. So the guy went in ahead of him with his 3 notebooks, and he lasted about 4 minutes, and they kicked him out. And he said, I can't. He says, I'm not going to go through all that crap. Next, and in comes Carl with a sheet of paper, and Carl's brilliance is he can take very complicated things and just make them real simple. And so he just said, here, X, Y, Z, here's what I think, and he was an absolute success. And so I think that's, he's to your point, I think that's how that works.
So
I gave my
you
favorite.
Just answered another question with a story. Oh. So, Bob, how did Rick do on that story? Because it just seems like this is just what you do.
It is. I'll give you my favorite Carl Williams quote. So you may remember this, Betsy. There was a point in the Walt Disney World group where everybody was kind of gaga about going to the Gallup Institute, and learning about your strength. And I went. It was great. Their executive program was really, really spectacular. My colleague, Kelly Pounds, who worked for the DU, and Kelly's probably I have to say this the right way, my longest lived friend. If I say oldest, she smacks me because she's a little bit older than me. But Kelly and I went to high school together. We've known each other for about 54 years. And she's wired real differently than me, but we're good friends. So she went to Gallup, and the 2 other Disney folks who went to Gallup with her were Sam Pinsula and Carl, and both finance guys. And Sam's also a great friend. And her best takeaway from that experience was Carl's quote. He said, well, if you have more than 3 things on your list, it's just a list.
That's great. That's great.
Well,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Shakespeare often wrote.
Awesome.
Shakespeare wrote a lot of 3-scene acts. So I mean, there's some wisdom in that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to get to your projects of what you're working on with the Zenovation and with the Tales of Mouse and Men. But to wrap up the storytelling, can I ask you, can I channel some people in my audience, and can you give some advice to them? Would that be okay?
Sure.
So I have like several lean consultants, let's just say, for example, who really want to influence leaders to really just take on more, like to implement like more of a continuous improvement, people-centered learning kind of culture. And so they struggle with influencing them. How can they use storytelling to level up their influence around that? And then I have a question for my coaches, but I'll just use them as my example for consultants.
I'm sorry, but I need to know what lean consultant means.
Rick, do you know? Like those are the people who want to like put in like the Toyota production system where like the respect for people at the core and problem solving at the deeper levels of the organization, where they want like frontline cast members to like solve the problems of the business.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I can tell you a real quick one. There's lots of, I mentioned there's story typology. There's a lot of types of stories. But the first one I would tell if I were that person is, if I were the coach, I would help the leader that I was coaching come up with what we call a look back story. Okay, leader, here's what we're going to do. It's 12 years from now, and everything you're trying to do has worked brilliantly. All the metrics are off the chart. Of course, we need to know what those are so we can really put the detail in there. So we're going to make up a story looking back from 12 years from now, and the story is about how we did it. That's one way to do it. It's like
you kind of place them in it, like place a picture of like what could it look like in the future. And then if we were looking back.
It's reverse engineering. If you can articulate what the outcome really looks like, then in the story, because of the plot points in the narrative and all those pieces of story, you can literally work backwards from, if that's the end of the story, how'd you get there from today?
You know, if you'll let me, Betsy, I would tell you a story about how, because I was thinking about this because you sometimes ask your guests on your show, you know, what would you tell? So, but what do you think is important to tell your consultants? What do they need to know from you? And so I thought about that, and maybe this is a way to answer that question. The thing I would tell them about influencing other people, and this is, I need better words, but get involved and don't Zoom if you can help it. And let me tell you where I came from on that. And it involves a story about Joe Rohde. And I know you know Joe Rohde, Betsy, but for your audience, Joe is now he's a retired Imagineer from Disney, but hugely influential and very so creative. And everybody knows he's got the great earring that he wears, you know, big long earring.
Just one? I thought it was multiple.
No, it's a huge gauge in his ear.
I think he's got one. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just this story. So Joe was did a lot at Animal Kingdom Park, and particularly this story was about Everest, about how they designed Everest. And somebody had asked him to do a video for art students. And just because, of course, he's an artist, this was never published, and it's not out there, and I don't have it, but I remember it. It was so impactful to me, and because I got to take it to my daughter's art class, and it was so special. But Joe is in this video, and he starts talking about it. He says, "Let me tell you how important art is and how it can be helpful." He said, let's say, he says, oh, you carry your pad with you and your pen, and he said, I was in Nepal or whatever it was, researching this park and this ride about Everest. And he said, so I sat on a street bench, and I looked up at this beautiful building. It was so interesting the way this building was designed. It was old, and so I looked at this window up there, and it was really different looking, and I couldn't figure out why. So I started to sketch it, and when you sketch it, you start to notice, oh, you know what? The glass panes, when you look at it that closely, they're a little different. 3 of them were different than the 4th one. And you know, the painting was scuffed off on the bottom, and it looked like there were different colors of paint that I hadn't noticed before. And I wonder if it was painted shut. And anyway, he said, when you stare at it, because you're drawing it, you really begin to notice things. And somebody kind of walked up behind him while he was sketching and watched him for a minute and said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm just really interested in that window up there. It's just got, it's a style I've never seen before. And so I'm just trying to capture it here. And it got him into a conversation. And he said, the guy that he didn't know, looked at him and said, you know, if you like that window, you should come to my grandfather's house. He's got some doors and windows that I think you would think are fascinating. The guy said, why don't you come over for dinner? Well, okay, so he goes over for dinner, and they show him the doors, and he's sketching the doors, and all the family is starting to gather around behind him, and he's talking about why that's interesting, and his grandfather comes out and talks about the history of the door, when it was built, and how it was broken once, and it had to be repaired, and they had this great dinner, and they told stories all night. And That's the sort of detail that happens when you put that sort of focus when you try to draw something. What I do, what Rick Allen does, is I get my camera out and I go snap a picture of the thing and I walk on. And so those sort of things never happened. His point was art can help you get involved. And then he said, and by the way, to the students, he said, by the way, you don't have to be good at it. You can be horrible at art. That's not the point. You don't have to draw something that's beautiful. You just have to put the effort in. And son of a gun, one time I tried it. I'm a horrible artist. I'm not a good artist. But I went out. We had a place at the beach, and I went out and I sat down on the back porch and I started drawing a picture of our thatch on the back of the back of our deck. And sure enough, some electrician, which we'd asked to come work on the house, he comes up and he kind of looks at me and he looks at me doing, what are you doing? Oh, well, I'm trying to draw a picture of this thatch. I mean, nothing monumental happened, but we had gotten into a conversation and it was all because of that artwork. So the point that I think that really illustrates is, man, you got to get involved. You can't do that on a Zoom. You can't get that connected with your people on a Zoom. And Bob, we just did some consulting work for the Florida Aquarium, and it was a great company to work for. And we pushed hard there in Tampa. And so everybody was saying, hey, we're going to do our big report out on what we had learned to help them and to help as a consultant for them. And it was like, well, we can just do it on Zoom. We can just do it on Zoom. We went, no, we want to show up. We want to show you. We want to talk to you. And I got to go up there with their whole team. And son of a gun, man, the difference was incredible. The CEO came to the meeting and he said, I'm just so impressed that you guys are here. And he got involved in all the questions. And afterwards he said, come on, you're not leaving. And he grabbed me and the other of the ideas team, and he toured us around for 3 hours around the aquarium, showed us all the things they wanted to do and the things that they're planning on next week. That would never happen on Zoom. Just wouldn't have happened. So I guess that one of the things I wanted to tell your team was, hey, if you're a consultant, if that's a small thing to influence people, man, you got to get involved. If you can. I know you can't fly all over the world all the time, but if you can, get in front of people and have that interaction, and that helps with that influence, and that's a story that might help to illustrate that.
I think that there's like a lot of things in what you're saying about the storytelling too, is that it's like it's really being immersed in the details of like noticing stuff. And then it's like if you are influencing somebody, and maybe this is just the essence of even like brand messaging, is like it's paint a picture of what's possible for somebody with words in like sensory detail, like really paint the picture. Like imagine if this is happening. It seems like that's the consistency throughout all of it is, like like if we're telling a story, so instead of answering questions, tell the story about what the principle is so that somebody could picture it. And instead of like trying to influence people like just with the facts, like begin with like, imagine what's possible.
Yeah, that's great.
If you're doing this, like just imagine and paint it with sensory detail. Like I think this is why I love so much of what I do with brand messaging, but when it gets converted into website copy, it's like a really good website tells the story around like what's the transformation somebody is going to have. And a lot of people will say from a conversion standpoint, like keep it short and sweet. But part of me feels like I kind of push back on it emotionally. It's like, but also you want to invite people into the story of what you're creating for them, with and for them, together. So I think that might be like, if we were going to summarize the storytelling, is paint a picture. Don't tell the facts, let the facts kind of support it, begin with that. And that's like the skill. And that could be, if you're in an interview, answer the questions with a story first. If you are leading a team and you're guiding them, tell the story. Like, don't tell the results, tell the story, the results, and then maybe you could back it up with the data. If you're doing a pitch deck on something, don't pitch it with the big PowerPoint, like, Carl's friend was. Maybe like just bring in the salient points. Like that seems to be the bottom line in the transferable concepts. Does that sound accurate to you? Did I get it right? Or would you say something different?
I would say that's right. What you made me think of, the best interview, a guy named Brian Bucinich. I don't know if you worked with Brian at Disney, but Brian's a really smart guy. And so I interviewed him for a role one time, and he was exactly what you just said. He came in, had the resume, the whole thing, but no matter what question I had, Brian, X, Y, or Z, what do you think about that? And he'd pause for a second, and he goes, let me tell you a story about and then he told me about one time I was a duty manager and blah, 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 and I made a decision based on Y. And instead of Z, and here's why. And then I'd ask him another question. Yep, that's a good point. Here's, the other day I was teaching my team, and here's what I teach him. It was all story. And I think he's a great example of what you just said.
Get him on your podcast. My friend Rick Stone, who is one of my mentors and gurus, in addition to being my friend, Rick's a consummate storyteller. He wrote a great book. There's only one book people say, hey, can I read a book about storytelling? This is the book. It's called Story Intelligence by Richard Stone. Well, and I don't even know if he really says this directly in that book or not, but one of Rick's great points when we worked together always was story itself is the great exercise in the art of the possible. So, and you kind of, Betsy, just sort of alluded to that, and that is a great takeaway. That's exactly right. When you're in a story, and particularly if it's your story, everything's possible. You don't have to settle yet. You don't have to land anywhere yet. So I think that's a really important takeaway for the way this goes. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. That is exactly, and Rick's story about the guy with the interview is a perfect illustration of it.
It's almost like I was picturing, I have like for my intro calls, like I have a forum of people saying, what's going on in your life that makes you want to be on this call? If you had a solution, what could you create, or achieve or something like that? I wonder if like switching it to be like, paint me a picture, of what, like paint me a picture with your words about what you really want to create or achieve with your consulting or coaching business. Paint me a picture of what it looks like now. I think that could be a more interesting conversation, because then it's like outside of like, oh, I just really want to have a website. It's like, well, like let's paint a little picture. That would be interesting. I have to think about that. I'm going to get back to you on the application to even like a discovery meeting and a conversation, because it seems like I want to get to the Tales of Mouse and Men, and I'm dying to hear about the Zenovation thing. So can we jump into those things? And because I could probably ask you 1,000 more questions about storytelling, but I don't want to leave without those things.
Sure. Well, let's do Zenovation as a groundwork, because that's quick, right? So as I mentioned, when let's face it, it's certainly not surprising that when you've had careers like Rick and I have, and you get to a certain age in your life and a certain point in your career, say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to, write some books and do some talks and do some stuff. Say, okay, because, gee, I don't know, maybe I know things that might be useful, and maybe I don't, but I think most of us think we do. So when I sold the company, and I'm still, oddly, I'm still consulting with them. But, it is about passion for me. We were thinking about, say, hey, what advice would you give, a consultant or an entrepreneur in general? And I got a bunch of it, but one of the key ones is stay swimming in your passion pit and watch the cash flow, right? But that passion piece is real important. Rick does a beautiful entire talk about passion, and it's part of our Tales of Mouse and Men talk. Anyway, Zenovation happened because I said, okay, I'm passionate about storytelling and about brands and about innovation. And I've kind of spent my whole life doing those three things. I'm also passionate about what has happened in my life because of diligent attention to my Zen practice and my studies with Thich Nhat Hanh and all these things. I said, great, we're going to mash that together into a matzo ball. And I'm going to say, okay, we're going to do cool stuff. We're going to tell stories, basically, which is what we do at Zenovation Network. But we're also going to imbue it with the learnings and the lessons and the practice of Zen mindfulness. So that's where that brand came from, right? It's the intersection of, Zen mindfulness training with a lifetime of experience in those things, with the intention to use stories to share the experience. So that's and there's a website, zenovationnetwork.com. People can go look at it. But so that's the construct for that. Within that, very, very early on, in fact, it was collaterally being developed as Zenovation Network was being developed. Rick and I, for a long time, have said, I think we have some stories, particular stories about Disney, that nobody else has. And I think they may be interesting. And the reason we have them is because of point of view, because of Dad's tenure and then our tenure. We just got to see things happen sometimes on our back porch. So we have an interesting perspective. And I always joke that the Tales of Mouse and Men we're now calling it the Tales of Mouse and Men Project, because Rick mentioned we spent some time at the Disney archives. It was mind-blowing. And they're such amazing people. And we walked away saying, this is more than our keynote talk. Yes, we're going to keep doing that, but we've spent the last 72 hours, almost all of them, by the way, working on what we hope will become Tales of Mouse and Men, the book. And you mentioned a podcast, and we've done the first couple of pilot episodes of the Tales of Mouse and Men podcast. So it really is a brand at this point, sort of. But the idea is, as Rick said, 102 years of Disney tall tales and insights. And that's the whole notion of it. And we can go in more depth, but that's really what it is. And the first criteria has also already been met because we've had a blast just getting the project to where it is,
So the Zenovation Institute, is that what you call it? Zenovation
Network.
So people want to participate in the Zenovation network. Like what can they participate? How do they engage with you all in that?
The notion of the network sort of goes like this. It's two-sided. So if you go to the website, we list our current Zenovating partners, and that's Rick. And you mentioned Chris Trapp. Chris is one of those Zenovation Network partners. My friend Kelly that I mentioned. Did you ever work with Dee Burns at Disney in HR?
I work with Sonia. Is it?
No, that's different Burns.
Oh.
But Dee was my HR consultant when I was at Disney. Anyway, we're old friends. She's a member of the network. Is a woman named Lisa Sibilia. So we've got a collection of people, and we're doing collaborative talks and workshops together. So that's one face of the network. The other conceit around the network is, and remember, this is all brand new, so we're just starting. The idea is that if you come to see Rick and I present Tales of Mouse and Men, you will then be able to become part of the Zenovation Network. And there will be webinars, and we'll try this one out on you. This is a fairly new idea. This was an idea we hatched this week. So I won't get into lots of detail. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people are now co-opting the term mastermind. Everybody's got a mastermind book, a mastermind session, a mastermind class, a mastermind workshop. And I feel bad for the guy who really did that and then didn't protect his trademark. But in Zen, we talk about the opposite of that. So what we talk about is beginner's mind. And the reason we talk about that is for a beginner, anything could be possible. So we're going to do, as part of the Zenovation Network, we're going to offer beginner's mind sessions for members of the network.
I love that.
And that's a peer coaching environment guided by some mindfulness principles to say, like, yeah, we're going to explore everybody's problems, but we're going to do it a little different, right? So that's the notion of what the network part of it really means.
I think that fits well with the innovation idea, because if you're already a mastermind, then you're going to be closed. If you have a beginner's mind, then you're going to be open to what's possible. I think that branding wise, that totally fits. I think I would love to think on you. I would love to think with you guys on all of these things. And can I be a part of the network? That sounds fun for me.
Heck yeah. Come on aboard. Go look at the website first and make sure it doesn't make you say that's nuts. But if you don't think it's nuts, sure, we'll talk about it.
I have a vision for, to me, the way I want to save the world is, I think if we can get a group of people with a variety of different kinds of consulting and coaching expertise together to try to go help organizations in a more collaborative way, where we're not competing against one another, where we're actually activating some of the stuff we had talked about before we got on, like true performance excellence from that old standpoint of what we were raised on. I think that we could change the world. I think that we can if we all get out of our silos. So I love the idea of getting people with different disciplines out of our silos and think more holistically about, what we're trying to accomplish together, and how do we leverage, what you said, swim in our passion, but also from my standpoint, swim in our strengths. Well, your passion is one thing, but
they tend to overlap. So,
Well, your passion is what you want to help. To me, passion, the word passion comes from the Latin, or I think it's Latin, to suffer. Passion isn't what you love, it's what you hate. It's what you want to see different in the world. That's what activates you. Your strengths are what you love. These are what you're best at. So it's the passion is, we're passionate about, we want to solve XYZ problem, and then our strengths, we could all come together. So that's my little side vision. I don't know if it aligns or not, but that's what I would love to see in the world.
My Zen teacher, so Thich Nhat Hanh, who technically died a couple of years ago.
Wait, I was did you know him personally?
Yes. He ordained me in this tradition. So Ty...
I got to hit... Definitely an overhold podcast.
I can talk Buddhism till I bore you to complete tears. But Ty would always say, and he was he was funny. He had such a wry wit. But one time he's when we would do retreats. He's doing Dharma talk in front of 2,000 people, but he'd say, don't practice meditation because you want to be enlightened. And don't practice it because you want to develop your focus and concentration and insight. So if somebody comes up to you and says, well, how come you do that? Just look at them right in there and say, I like it, and smile. He said, and that's what I mean by passion. Honestly, you're not incorrect about your definition, but for me, it's simpler than that. And right now, and this really bears on Tales of Mouse Men, I want to do this because I like it. It's fun. Mm-hmm. It's energizing me, and and I'm confident enough to think that if it energizes Rick and I, it'll find an audience.
Yeah, it'll magnetize. So how do people engage with you if they want to hire you for the Tales of Mouse and Men?
The website website's best. Just come to the ZenovationNetwork.com. And if you just go to the program page, you'll see Tales of Mouse and Men. Click on that. Tells you all about it. Send us an email and we'll jump on the horn and talk it up.
Or you could go to rickallenconsultinggroup.com because, we both have them. And then and you could jump on there too. And the same thing, Tales of Mouse and Men is on there.
Yeah, and both of the websites have a little demo video on there. It explains what we're doing and how that works. And
And who's the best audience for the Tales of Mouse and Men? Like if you had it all your way and you're like, I hope these kind of people hire us for this kind of talk. Who is it that you would most want?
Well, we actually have that in the program rundown, but to ad lib it a little bit, certainly I would say anyone in any kind of leadership role who would sort of like to gain some learnings about things that Disney might do well, and I'm saying that clumsily, but I don't have my sheet in front of me. I can get it real quick. Rick, vamp while I get the sheet.
Well, and then the other was, certainly people that are having events for their team. So group events, that's a great time to have, at the end of that, to somebody say, hey, let's talk about kind of how Disney did things. And it's also an inspiring thing, and they're funny stories. And so I think that's another group that can do
great,
well.
Great for a retreat, day one or day two of a retreat, leadership or just a team retreat. Also just flat out, it's an entertaining keynote. I mean, this is, like we said, this is not bar charts and graphs. Rick and I are, we've been bouncing off each other since we were both, toddlers. So we have enough rhythm, and these stories are, we've tested this, by the way, we're not just making this up. They're pretty entertaining. There's plenty of laughs in this thing. And there's some really fun insight about, early days at Disneyland and decisions that got made. And a lot of it too is kind of saying, you see the Walt Disney Company's product and go, that's phenomenal. Oh my gosh, what an amazing. Let me tell you, there's some sausage being made back there, and we talk about that sometimes,
And Rick, do you do operational consulting too?
Yes, thank you for asking. Sure. Yeah, I love helping companies who can, I know we can help improve their guest service, get their guest service to be magical, like we all work so hard to do at the Walt Disney Company, and it's been really fun to do that with various groups as well.
Awesome. So we've talked about a lot of different things as it relates to your shared Allen history from your dad and your own experiences. 120 years of experience at Disney, or 102?
102. 102 or 103. I can't remember. I get the number right.
102 or 103 years of experience. We got into your journeys into what you do now, and everything about storytelling, and then the Zenovation network, as well as your individual group, your consulting, your talk, speaking, all of that. Is there anything else you want to tell me about that? And I'm just not asking the right questions, or anything else that you want to share with my audience, and I'm just not coming up with the right question.
Man, I think your questions are good. We got to tell a bunch of stories, and so I'm happy.
Yeah, me too. I'd flip it around. Is there anything else you want to ask us that you think might be of interest to your audience?
Yeah, but then if I do ask those other questions, I'm going to add another hour.
Oh well, we'll just have to come back.
Know about I want to hear about the Buddhist practice and how that applies to business. I want to hear a little bit more about Zenovation, and that is there's a million. Now I have a million questions, but I have to be respectful of everybody's time at some point. So I thank you for flipping it, but I really have nothing else to add. So
well,
otherwise it'll go on for a long time.
Maybe
Do
this again.
I do want to be a part of like the Disney, capturing the Disney history from not just the like some of the cool backstage stories, but some of these big initiatives that I know, Rick, we were a part of, and Bob, you are a part of, like the performance excellence. I think that'd be fascinating. But anyway, thank you both so much for being on the show. I so appreciate it. Definitely check out the different websites. Will be in all of the show notes. And thank you all for listening. I love this whole idea of storytelling. I'm going to be percolating on all of this to how to incorporate even more storytelling into my approaches for brand messaging and even like the discovery meeting. So stay tuned because I'm going to still percolate on that. And if you all really enjoy shows and you want this show and you want to see other people like Bob and Rick and be inspired to like definitely hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And until next time, I am really grateful that you were here. And thank you both for being on the show.
Our pleasure.
It's our pleasure.